Hi guys, this is your host, and if you like chilling with some scary stories every now and then welcome to my channel. Now let's get started, and as always, before we begin, please make sure that you subscribe for more videos just like this one. And without further ado, here's our story. It was whispered. In the winter of 1959, 9 hikers set out into the snowy Ural mountains of Russia and never returned. No trace of them or their campsite could be found until 3 months later when an expedition returned to search the area. There they found the tent sliced open from the inside, their frozen bodies scattered around, and some strange injuries. There were a lot of questions but few answers. What had happened to them? How did they die? And what was the strange thing about their injuries? Well, what I can tell you is that it's one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. It has spawned dozens of theories, everything from military experiments to paranormal activity. But what exactly happened at Dyatlov Pass? Our story starts in the city of Yekaterinburg in the Urals region of Russia. Back then, it was called Sverdlovsk. Here, in the winter of 1959, 10 students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute were preparing for an adventure. They were a tight-knit bunch, mostly in their early 20s, all of them experienced hikers. For the next few days, they packed supplies, checked the weather reports, and planned their route. And with all of the preparations done, they set off into the snow-covered mountains. Their destination was a remote peak called Otorden Mountain in the northern Urals. The hike was not an easy one. They struggled through harsh terrain, freezing winds, and knee-deep snow. The temperature often dropped below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. But the group pressed on. There were 9 men and 1 woman, Ludmila Dubinina, and overall they were a confident and skilled bunch. They were led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, who was passionate about the mountains. He loved nothing more than exploring the Ural wilderness, and he and his friends planned to spend a week skiing, hiking, and camping. By the time they reached their destination, they were exhausted, so they decided to make camp near a lonely, snowy slope before continuing their journey. Little did they know that this would be the last camp they would ever make. 4 days later, on January 28th, the group got some bad news. One of their members, Yuri, had come down with a fever and other ailments and had decided to turn back. He wasn't feeling well and didn't want to risk getting his friends sick too. So he said his goodbyes and headed back down the mountain. Now, unbeknownst to him, he had actually saved his own life because if he had stayed with the group, he would have died along with the others. With one less hiker, the group pushed on. They were determined to reach their destination no matter what. As night fell, they set up camp near a spot that would later become known as Dyatlov Pass. Here they wrote their final diary entries. They told of a group of friends having a great time, laughing and joking around. They sang songs, played games, and made jokes about the weather. They seemed in high spirits despite the cold, and there was no hint of the tragedy that would strike them down that night. As the sun rose, the group prepared for a day of skiing and hiking. They left their tent behind and headed off into the snowy wilderness, but they never returned. For 2 days the group was missing. No one knew where they had gone or what had happened to them. Search parties were organized, but the weather was so bad that they had to be canceled. Then, on February, when the weather cleared, a friend of the group finally spotted their tent on a slope. It was half buried in snow and ripped open from the inside. At first, no one could believe what they were seeing. A tent like this shouldn't be ripped open from the inside, unless something very scary is happening outside. But what could it be? They searched the area and found 9 bodies. 8 were found near the tent, and 1 was found a few hundred yards away. The hikers were frozen solid, and it took several hours to bring them back to the city. When they were finally able to examine the bodies, they found something even more disturbing. Most of the bodies had strange injuries. Their clothes were torn, and some of them were missing. One of the hikers had a fractured skull, another had a broken nose, and one of the women had a small hole in her head. Some of the bodies had severe cases of hypothermia, but none of them had any signs of trauma. So, what had happened to the Dyatlov group? How did they die? And what was the strange thing about their injuries? Well, what I can tell you is that it's one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. It has spawned dozens of theories, everything from military experiments to paranormal activity. But what exactly happened at Dyatlov Pass? One of the most popular theories is that the group was caught in an avalanche, and that's what caused their injuries. But there is no evidence to support this theory, and avalanches do not usually cause the kind of injuries that these hikers had. Another theory is that the group was experimenting with psychedelic mushrooms, and that is what caused their strange behavior and injuries. But again, there is no evidence to support this theory. Perhaps the scariest theory is that the group was attacked by a wild animal, maybe a bear or a wolf. But this also doesn't explain how the hikers were found. Frozen solid, perhaps the most plausible theory, is that the group became disoriented and wandered into a remote area of the mountains where they eventually froze to death. But the strange thing is that there is no evidence that they ever left the pass. Their tent was found on the slope, and their belongings were still inside it. Even more strange is that there is no evidence that they ever tried to leave the pass. Their skis were still with them, and their hiking poles were still planted in the snow. Even stranger is that their bodies were found in different places. 8 of the bodies were found near the tent, and 1 was found a few hundred yards away. Why did one of the hikers wander away from the group? And why was he found so far away from the others? One of the most disturbing things about the case is that there are still a lot of unanswered questions. What really happened to the Dyatlov group? How did they die? And what was the strange thing about their injuries? We may never know the answers to these questions. But one thing is for sure, their laughter would be the last sound they ever made in this world. What do you think happened at Dyatlov Pass? Let me know in the comments section below. And while you're there, make sure to subscribe for more videos just like this one. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.